So moving on, we've got a wonderful panel coming up where we're going to talk about, we've talked about big sweeping change. We've talked about some incremental steps that are urgent. So we wanted to join, there are some providers with us who are really going to talk about meeting people where they are. So we've got a panel on sort of cases for practical reduction on greenhouse gas emissions. So we are going to see a video from Canada Homestay, from Jennifer Wilson, the Managing Director, as well as Brooke Matta and Melissa Buerkette, who are the Admissions Counselor and Director of Partnership Development, respectively, for Global Education. And then they will be joined by our Master Moderator, Eddie West, for some Q&A. So be sure to pop those questions in the Q&A.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Wilson. I'm the Managing Director of Canada Homestay Network. We are a small, not-for-profit family business. Well, not so small anymore. It was started by my mom 25 years ago back in Toronto, and we have since grown to be the largest homestay organization in the country with over 140 employees, serving more than 80,000 students since we started, about 10,000 students a year now. And we have almost 6,000 host families across Canada who we count among the wonderful people who help support our students when they come to study here. We look after about 100 client educators across Canada. That's made up of language schools, private high schools, publicly funded high schools, universities, and colleges, again, from coast to coast. I'm excited to talk to you today about our initiatives in the green economy. We realized about 8 years ago that we could be doing more. My colleague Nathan was in a program at BCIT at the time and did an analysis of our organization and where we could have the most influence and impact. As you can see from this diagram, we're connected immediately to our homestays and our clients and schools, and a little farther reaching from our agents that help support students who come to study in Canada and the students themselves through the additional services that they're offered, such as flights and travel and their schools and so on. So we felt like we would have the most impact with our host families. And we understand too that the way to reach people is not through drastic calls to action or dire warnings. It's through encouragement of small, gradual changes. It's through meeting them where they are and finding the story inside of every statistic. It's through these baby steps. I think nearly everyone agrees that environmental problems are important, but we aren't acting fast enough to solve them. And people believe taking action on environmental problems is either inaccessible, unaffordable, or less urgent than other problems. And even if you do take action, it's hard to feel the impact of what you do on the bigger problem. I think we need to speak more to people outside of our community using inclusive language and powerful images to make everyone feel they have the ability to take action in their day-to-day to create a more sustainable environment. So based on the recommendations that Nathan found in his analysis of CHN, we realized, of course, that we could make a difference with host families. So the first thing we did was write a green housing guide, which has tips for reducing your home's impact on the environment, and we've since expanded it to include some tips on how to talk to students about climate change using language that will help reach them. We also, as an organization, are Bullfrog powered. Bullfrog Power is a Canadian company that invests in various renewable projects all across the country. Bullfrog ensures that for every kilowatt hour of electricity you use as an individual or a business, that they will invest in a renewable source and inject that same amount of energy into the grid on your behalf. Bullfrog Power also owns a company called LESS, which does carbon offsets, and we encourage our students to use those carbon offsets. We have a lot of other initiatives that I'm excited to talk to you about and to share. We're happy to share our resources and ideas as understanding that we are part of a larger community that's all trying to make a difference and that we could combine our efforts and have a bigger impact. So just want to say thank you and appreciate all of the work that all of you are doing and look forward to continuing the conversation.
In January of 2020, Global Experiences launched its Green Initiative. The purpose of this initiative is simple: become carbon neutral by 2025 in response to the overwhelming global climate crisis. To begin, we determined that our main focuses would be, first and foremost, offsetting the flights of all interns on our programs by supporting diverse climate projects, and second, adding a green education to the intern experience from start to finish. We believe that in a world where our individual and collective actions make a difference, it's our duty to implement green and sustainable practices wherever possible. We hope that interns are excited to make sustainable choices with global experiences and that other organizations are inspired to adopt similar practices. We calculated that during the spring of 2020, interns on our programs around the world had flights that produced 338 tons of carbon emissions. We then offset these emissions with the purchase of carbon credits at no additional cost to the interns. The projects we chose to support are reforestation in Australia, safe water access in Rwanda, and wind power in India. We're proud to help interns reduce their carbon footprints and prioritize sustainability through these important projects. As for the green education part of our initiative, we incorporated resources for interns to use throughout their programs. Their pre-departure orientation contains resources about how to be green in their cities, how to pack and travel in a more sustainable way, as well as how to reduce and recycle while abroad. Upon arrival, their orientation emphasizes these key topics and engages them with green challenges throughout their time abroad. While our green initiative is just getting started, we're so excited to see where it takes us and to continue adding new processes to meet our challenge of carbon neutrality by 2025. In the words of our founder and CEO, Global Experiences was founded to make the world a better place, and we can no longer deliver on this vision without a serious commitment to protecting the environment.
Thank you again, and I just wanted to kind of kick off. I think I'll start with Brooke, you and Melissa. Could you elaborate a little bit more on the specific actions that your organization has taken in terms of the carbon offsetting work that you're doing?
Sure, Ed, I can field that question. It's Melissa here. So carbon offsetting might seem like a daunting process, but we've actually found it to be quite easy. It's in essence a two-step process. So first, you really just need to calculate the number of carbon emissions that your travel is producing, and then purchase the credits to offset the emissions. So basically for calculating your flights, there are many calculators out there. We chose to use climatecare.org. Virtually any form of travel, plane, car, train. We did this for our students' round trip flights because we know round trip flights are one of the biggest producer of carbon emissions that a student may have in a year. So yeah, we estimated the number of tons to be 338 for our spring interns. And then there are a number of other resources where you can locate sustainable projects and carbon negative projects, essentially. So neutralizing the effect of the carbon emissions, purchasing those carbon credits to go towards those projects. So yeah, it's a very simple two-step process. It was not as expensive as we thought it was going to be. So we were able to not raise the program fees for the students, which we feel like is very important. And as Brooke mentioned in the video, the projects that we chose were reforestation in Australia, clean water in Rwanda, and wind power in India.
That is so cool. That is so cool. Thank you. The next question actually is for you, Jennifer. And your organization is all about host families and hosting international students. And I imagine, given the sheer size of your organization and how many families and how many students you work with, folks' opinions may vary as to the urgency of addressing climate change in their work and lives. And I just wonder if you could share a little bit more about how you've approached that work specifically with your host families.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think you're absolutely right. It's hard. I think something I struggle with personally and professionally is how much to thrust my passions on other people. Like, what are we sort of obligated to do when it comes to talking about these issues, and how much do you push your perspective? So we've taken a very soft approach. We've just sort of made the resources available and hoped that people would be interested. But I also recognize the folks who read the Green Hosting Guide are people who are probably already engaged and interested and want to know how they can do better. So I'm really curious, as part of this conversation, to talk about how we can reach people who aren't already thinking about this stuff. But the other thing that I would, well, so yes, the Green Hosting Guide, and yeah, we've also hosted seminars and workshops, and we have an online certification course for host families that helps them sort of walk through what's required of them as a host, and we talk about it in there a little bit. We have a newsletter that goes out to hosts every few months, and that always has a footnote about Bullfrog Power. Host families can sign up as a friend of CHN and have a $25 credit the first month that they enroll with Bullfrog Power. So, you know, we're doing all of these things, and I hope it's having an impact, but I don't really know. I think probably the most helpful and appealing aspect of what we talk about is the cost savings. So that's really what reaches the host. When we say you can save money on your, you know, the whole hosting experience, or this can help you with your finances, I think that's what really speaks to people more broadly.
Very cool. So now this next question is really for any and all of you. As we think, I mean, between Robin Shields' presentation and Hans de Wit's presentation and so many other speakers, both on the Australia, Asia, New Zealand session yesterday and now today's, you know, it's a very future focused kind of conversation. What do each of you maybe see for the future of your own work, whether as an individual professional and or on behalf of the organization you work to support? Like maybe say 5-10 years down the line, or even, you know, the next year or more.
Yeah, I'll start. There's a lot that I think we could be doing differently in the future. And I noticed there's in the Q&A here, there was a question about what we're doing or what institutions are doing to embed climate literacy and green education for international students. And that I wanted to answer that, but before I did, I just want to highlight the idea that we're a partner of the educators. We're not in the classroom talking to the students day to day. And I wonder where the intersection of what the educator's sort of responsibility is to speak to students and engage with students, and how we can, as a homestay provider or any other number of vendors that work in this field, like insurance providers or tour providers, or, you know, all of these folks who are part of the network that supports the industry. And perhaps we've been remiss in not doing more. I think I've made the mistake of assuming that that is the responsibility of the educator and not us, but I think that's probably wrong. So that's one thing we could do differently, is I think make more efforts for ourselves to incorporate it in our student orientations, for example, and host orientations, which we already do. So more training, more workshops for hosts and students. I want to survey hosts. So if it weren't for COVID-19, we would have already done that. That was part of our plan for this year, but it felt a little tone deaf to reach out to them and talk about that right now. But, you know, curious about what you think about that too. So want to survey our hosts about what's working and how we can engage them better. And do they know that the Green Hosting Guide exists, and how can we reach them better? I think we could be reducing travel even more. I think our speakers already mentioned this, but this idea that we can survive using Zoom is not going to go away. And I hope we can do more recruitment and you know, conversations with our clients and that kind of thing with Zoom. And I think we can take a firmer stance on carbon offsets too. So we haven't been able to fund those. We're a nonprofit and we just don't have the resources to pay for carbon offsets for all of our students. But I think we could have that embedded in the invoice as a standard, that they pay for that as part of their homestay fee. And then they would have to opt out rather than opting in. You know, little adjustments like that could be quite profound as well. So yes, we could always do more. That's the message here.
I can jump in and chat a little bit about what Global Experience's plan is. So we really just rolled out our green initiative about 6 months ago. We are still at the early stages, but it's a 5-year plan. Our goal is to be carbon neutral by 2025. So there are some things that we have already put in place and some things that are definitely still to come. Of course, we're going to continue offsetting flights for not only our interns, but also our staff members as well. So just trying to make any type of travel that our organization does, like offset it and make it carbon neutral. Another big thing that we've talked about doing is an energy audit, similar to what it sounds like Jennifer and CHN have been prioritizing. So looking at sustainable energy sources, efficient lighting, our HVAC usage, things like that. So just from a more organizational standpoint. And then a few things that we've talked about adding on the educational side for our interns specifically are just continuing to build out those activities and challenges for them related to sustainable living while they're abroad. We've also talked about adding a green or sustainable scholarship, maybe having green ambassadors on the ground, which would be really cool just to represent those values with their peers. Looking at doing like a blog series with green updates and just information for the community at large. So we are trying to have a holistic approach, not just, you know, how can we be carbon neutral, but also how can we educate and inspire people along the way and hopefully create a ripple effect.
That's awesome. All right. Well, I mean, thank you all so much again. I actually am going to make a final ask as we're about to close because Jennifer, you're right. You pointed to some really great questions in the Q&A session that's come through. So I think what we want to do is post these on the LinkedIn discussion group. And if I could impose upon you to respond to those questions there after the fact, that would be awesome. So with that,
Eddie, we actually have an FAQ doc as well that we're planning to upload to the LinkedIn group. So if anyone wants to refer back to information about what Global Experience is doing, we'll put it there for everyone.
That's perfect. And I think we're going to have your green guide there too, Jennifer, on that note. So thank you all again. So fun to see you. And I think I'm going to turn it over back to CJ.